Awesome.
My guest today is Kristen Parker Yarnell, the co founder of the Miami Sudbury School in Miami, Florida, a fully self directed, democratic K 12 private school modeled after the flagship Sudbury Valley School that was founded in Massachusetts in 1968. Kristen was a conventional school teacher for several years in St. Louis, then moved back to Miami, where she grew up, proceeded to unschool her three children, discovered the Sudbury model of education, and launched the Miami Sudbury School in 2018. I had a chance to meet Kristen in person recently during a visit to South Florida, and I'm so excited for her to share her entrepreneurial journey today. Kristen Parker Yarnell, welcome to the Liberated
Thank you.
Podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that you're here. And I was just so excited to meet you when I was in Fort Lauderdale recently for an innovative educators conference that brought together hundreds of entrepreneurs, prospective entrepreneurs, parents, policy advocates, all kinds of folks interested in alternative education models. So I'd love to start, Kristen, if we could, with your professional background. You went into education, taught in mostly conventional private schools as well as at the university level. But I'd love to hear a little bit about what drew you to education in the first place and what sort of your early experiences were like working in a conventional classroom.
So, boy, I actually wanted to be I wanted to be a teacher since I was a little kid. Um, Probably to the dismay of my cousins, who I was always trying to force lessons on as we were playing. um, you know, I um I really loved when I was, I loved working with students. That's always been the delight, the really fun part. So I taught high school at an all-girls Catholic high school in St. Louis, Missouri. And I taught Spanish, I taught English, I ended up teaching environmental science, just kind of a variety of things. Um, and again, I just adored my students. But really right from the get-go, I noticed that there were a lot there were a lot of things I noticed that I thought, "Ooh, what's causing this?" Like, where are we at? There was a lot of passivity, a lot of waiting for me to, yeah, I would say, I'm not your cruise director here. Like, I know I'm the teacher here. I'm in charge of things. This is, I speak Spanish. Like, you're here to learn Spanish. Like, it felt like there was a lot of just waiting for me to say what to do next. And I felt like that, over time, I thought, gosh, this must be a learned behavior, to just be waiting and passive. Um, I also got quite a bit of pushback when I was like, well, we're going to run this whole class in Spanish because it's a Spanish class. And I actually had some older high schoolers that were really upset with me. Like, this is not how we do this. I know the formula of how to, get good grades here. I took this class to put it on my resume, but you know, um, they were pretty upset with me. um, the style that I thought, this will be really engaging. This is how we're going to, do this. And I was not conforming with what they had learned of how to get really good grades. Um, I became increasingly um, frustrated, uh, watching this system where the currency is the grade. And, sometimes wondering, like, and I could tell the students that wanted to come and talk and, hi, Mrs. Parker, but there was always like, are they talking to me because I hold their grades or because we're really about to have an interesting conversation? The power dynamics, and I took workshops on discipline with dignity and how to try to avoid power struggles. But I still just increasingly felt like this system is really set up for a power dynamic and a transactional model. Um, and again, I loved the students, but it was the system. I just I had to step back. And I was working on my master's at the time. So then I was, I went to St. Louis University and I taught introductory Spanish there. And I had office hours and nobody showed up. I'm like, this is free tutoring. Even just come by and practice Spanish. We're here to work together. And it was again a place where I felt like, What is really going on here?" Like, I'm in my ideal, like, aren't we all here to learn something new, so exciting? Um, uh, and again, I was frustrated. Why aren't they showing up for office hours? Why isn't this like an exciting dialogue? So, anyway, to fast forward, when I then we had our own children, and I started really thinking, okay, what do we want for them? I came across this book and I put it behind me because it was so influential for me in my life, Free to Learn. And it was there that a lot of these frustrations really took a name, and they, they came to make more better sense to me, in terms of child development, right? These young people were really frustrated. They were in these situations where they had to constantly perform, and the currency was the grade. And there wasn't a lot of space for exploration, for true curiosity. The book really spoke to me in terms of, what happens in schooling situations, with perfectionism. I was Catholic school educated myself. I'm a constantly recovering perfectionist. It'll be a lifelong journey. um, and and it was also where I'd first heard about Sudbury schools, and I hadn't heard about them in any of the graduate programs I'd been in. I had never heard of democratic schools. So, for me, it was a really exciting juncture, personally, as a person, as a parent, but then also as an educator, like, wow, I mean, it blew my mind. My husband's a child psychiatrist, and I was sitting next to him on the couch, like, listen to this. Like, these kids, like, at these Sudbury schools, they enjoy what they're doing, they play, they're they're free, they're autonomous, but they're part of a community. And then they still like pursue their interests and they go to college and they do all these cool things. Like, there was a part of me that thought, Is that cheating?" Like, you know, isn't it a rite of passage? You have to be suffering your way through school. And this was like, opening, like I think of it as if I'd been in this maze and there was this door to a secret garden that opened. I was like, you could also go into this garden and enjoy your childhood and emerge like a really competent adult. Um, so it was mind blowing. Obviously, as um, someone who loves research, I went down the research rabbit hole. I visited the Sudbury School in Fort Lauderdale, here, and loved it. But I couldn't be making the drive there. So we said, well, this just feels really right. Like it feels like the human thing that's been missing from education for me. I told our family, I was like, I think we need to start a Sudbury school. Like, I think we just have to. Um, and then I visited Sudbury schools, in Boulder and in Denver, and um, anyway, would talk with anyone who would talk with me about it. I mean, it still is so exciting for me. Even though I know for so many people, they're like, what, they still are having this reaction of like, is that cheating? Like, yeah, just
That's so
play all day. Are you allowed to?
so
You
great.
know? Um,
I just love that. Kristen, yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the actual startup and launch process for you. But just to backtrack a moment, Free to Learn, one of my favorite books written by Boston College psychology professor Peter Gray, who's an advocate of self-directed education and unschooling. He wrote the foreword to my Unschooled book, and he has done a lot of research on Sudbury Valley School in particular and Sudbury Model Schools and unschoolers more generally. Listeners of the podcast will know that 3 of my children attend Sudbury Valley School, the original school in Massachusetts that has inspired the growth of dozens of Sudbury model schools around the world, including Miami Sudbury School and some of the others that Kristen mentioned. So it's just great to see that you discovered this whole new way of educating and this whole other approach to teaching and learning that, as you say, you were never exposed to when you were training to become a teacher and working with other, students that you didn't know that this whole world existed. So that must have been really fulfilling to realize that there was some sort of missing puzzle pieces that you had discovered that then enabled you to launch your own program. So I'd love to hear, Kristen, kind of what happened from, kind of discovering Sudbury, knowing you want to start a school, visiting all of these different Sudbury schools. What happened next in terms of the mechanics of getting the Miami Sudbury School going?
So I think it's for most, I think for most enterprises, it's a story of persistence. Um, there was another mom that was really excited as well for her daughter. Um, and then when again, we just started talking with anybody who would talk with us.
And how did
Um,
you connect with her? Sorry to interrupt, but how did you connect with this mom who was your co-founder, I assume?
mhm.
Yeah. So how
Yes.
did you connect with a co-founder and kind of go down that path first? Yeah.
So our kids were best friends with each
Okay.
other. Just over at our house one day, I said, "Listen to this. I'm reading this book. How does this sound to you?" And she said, "That sounds amazing. Let's find out more." And she went with me, and we went to see Sunset Sudbury in Fort Lauderdale. I had the same reaction, like, wow. I think both of us were really struck by just how confident the young people were at that school. And we both said, that's what we want for our kids, you know, um, more than any academic accolades, those can come or not, but we really just want our kids to feel good about themselves and confident. Um, so it was just going forward and seeing, okay, well, what's the next step? I have a really large family here in Miami, lots of entrepreneurs in my family, and just folks that are really supportive, even if they don't always understand what I'm doing. I was really fortunate through family to be able to connect to some legal help. And researching, just starting a private school in Miami, and just the little pieces, and then looking for a location, which I think is always the big challenge for most businesses, but I think especially for schools. So that was really challenging. But then again, we just started as much as possible, word of mouth, putting things out. Um, and we had interest, and there was enough interest and enough persistence on our part to find a starter location. um, that when I visited the Sudbury School in Boulder, and one of their co-founders had been a graduate of Sudbury Valley School. um, at the staff there said something I thought that was really important for me at the time. They said, because I said, oh, I don't know, we don't even really have a location yet. Like, we're still. And one of them said, you know, families need you to start more than you need to wait. um,
Mm.
so she said, you're probably ready enough. You'll never be totally ready, but you're probably ready enough. And these families need you to start. And we found that to be true. So so we just did it.
So what was that initial location? How did you ultimately find a spot? What was it for you?
We affectionately call it our shoebox location because it was very small. It's 660 square feet. Just two adjoining classrooms at a church nearby. They had used it for their youth group and rented it to us for a really reasonable price. And we ended up making it look kind of like a studio apartment, with different like spaces there. Um, and I think it was challenging when parents would come, to see it, to first of all to think this is school. And then it is such a small space, but interestingly, our students loved the small space. We had some when we were getting ready to move to this larger space that were like, why do we have to move? We love this place, Um, because I find it with young people, it's less about the amenities and it's more about their feeling there of freedom. So
Mm.
even in that shoebox, 660 square feet, we had a little balcony, and we had access to their playground and field area. But even with this physically very small space, it was a place where young people it's a place where young people have freedom like they don't have anywhere else. Um, and you know this from Sudbury schools, but we just felt it over and over again.
I love that. Yeah, just such a calm, cozy space, it sounds like, for your initial location. And so you opened in the fall of 2018
Yep.
with how many learners?
Let's see. I think we were even under 10. We were pretty
Okay.
small.
And how
Um,
did you get those 10 initially? You said you kind of put word out, word of mouth, but did you post in Facebook groups? Did you have flyers? I guess, how did you find those initial founding families?
Yeah, it was mostly through social media and word of mouth. And interestingly, and I want to bring this piece in too when I think of, motivations for starting
Mm,
this, is very, very purposefully we launched our Facebook page on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, um, of 2018. And my background besides being an educator, was, even before then being involved with social justice. I was a Catholic worker in St. Louis, which is part of why I was in St. Louis, working with women and children. Um, uh, you know, to me, when I when I think of what we're doing here, I think of it very much as a social justice youth rights movement. I think of it as freedom for parents. It's liberation, from parents feeling like they have to be the academic police with their families, with their children. And for children, we're a place that they have human and civil rights. Um, and those are all too often suspended for young people. They enter school maybe at age 5, and they really aren't given their human and civil rights fully until they turn 18. Um, so I've really worked to have that as part of our messaging here, that this is a place for young people to have rights, and responsibilities because they come with both, right? But it's a very unique place. And I don't know if some of that, attracted families locally. But we launched our social media on Martin Luther King Jr. Day of 2018 and had community meetings,
mm.
at local Unitarian church, just whoever's interested, come. And then once we're getting closer to having this other space at a church, having more meet and greets, so people could have a forum for questions and answers. And it was exciting. There was a lot of interest. When you mentioned the Innovative Educators Network conference that we met at, That was so exciting because there were so many people talking about this stuff, right? This, like, liberation of education and these options and choices for young people and their families. We don't get so much of that down here in South Miami. And I
Yet, maybe, Kristen. It
Yet,
might be
yeah.
it might be, trickling out from Fort Lauderdale, which I say is the Florence, of the education renaissance. Shireen Radigan, the co-founder of InEd, talks about South Florida being, the education renaissance, and I do think Fort Lauderdale is the Florence of that. So it's trickling, I think, down to Miami.
I hope so, because I there really is interest, and I think
Yeah.
there that's what we experienced is people were really hungry for, like, "Oh my gosh, you're here?" I get calls all the time like, "There's a Sudbury School in Miami?" Like, "Yeah, we're here."
Yeah, and you actually mentioned before we started recording that just within the past week or two, you've been getting even more calls than usual from interested families curious about your educational approach. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you're hearing from those prospective families. What are they looking for? Why are they coming to you? And then some of your current families, what drew them to the Miami Sudbury School?
Yeah. You know, so families come from, all over the board, all over the world too. I've been getting calls. I talked to someone coming from Brazil, got a message from someone coming from Chile, someone coming from New Jersey. People are coming internationally and from around the country. And what I hear is that they say they're looking for an alternative, that they'll say, I don't like how the schools are forcing kids, or my child used to be really excited about learning and now they say they don't want to go to school, or that, they don't want to be forced to read. Um, or they'll say, they've got a second grader who's really anxious, like, and I've heard stories of second graders having panic attacks over testing, and things that as a person, that's that's so hard to hear. And then developmentally, like, it's just not right for that's developing not on par with where kids should be, putting their time and energy. And I just hear more and more parents calling and saying, I'm looking for alternatives. And I try to be really clear, have you read our website? Like, because, if you're coming with an idea that we're gonna be, doing these particular classes, that's not how we are. We really believe in choice here. Choices, not forces. You have to be part of the community, um, but we want your child to feel good about who they are first, and then they can learn anything they want. But what I keep hearing, and we joke that the common denominator at school is that almost everybody who's here, their parents said to me on the phone, almost verbatim, I just want my child to be happy.
Mm.
I keep a notebook whenever I'm talking to parents and students, and almost verbatim, every parent has said, I just want my child to be happy. And then I'll say, well, if we're there, then this is probably a good place for you to come and check out. Um,
Yeah, it's such a good point too. I mean, this is a common feature that I see in so many of the micro schools and low-cost private schools that I visit across the country. Just even though they're all very different in terms of their philosophy and approaches, the children are happy and the parents are happy that the children are happy. And so I think part of it is the sea change among parents to say, no, this isn't cheating. My kids should be happy, right? That we don't have to suffer through 13 years of coercive schooling in order to become adept as adults, right? We can do this a different way, and I think more and more families are open to that and exposed to that thanks to what you're building. I think it's important to mention too that Sudbury schools are typically characterized by having no adult imposed curriculum, classes, grades, tests, homework, any of the sort of common accessories of conventional schooling, that everything is driven by student interests. And it seems like parents are on board with that, right? From what you're
Yeah.
seeing.
Yeah. And, to talk about our current students, that's, what families tell us is like that they're happy. They're happier, they're more confident, or they're more relaxed. They're doing great. When parents first come and they'll say, "Oh, but I'm not going to get a report card." And we'll say, "We don't think you'll need a report card. You'll know how your child is doing. Like you'll know how they show up when they come home, and how they're doing. You won't need us to give a letter to this." And they'll do their own alternative transcripts, and we can talk about that sometime if you want. Um, you know, but as parents, you know how your child is doing. You can see it. Um, our students here, who, I just also love and adore. We have, I think, I'm trying to think of a few vignettes here. We have a student who, they had an IEP, in their public school, but I think for the most part, largely they were pretty demoralized. They were kind of told, "You're not a very good learner. You're probably not going to succeed." I think they were held back a grade. It's hard for us to really even conceptualize that now, knowing this person who's at the school, because they're such a leader here. They run events, they like take charge of things. They're so engaged in our community that to even imagine them having been, talked down to by adults at another school or told that they were never going to amount to anything is crushing. It's heartbreaking. And their mom came up to me towards the end of the last school year, and they commute at least 45 minutes a day, each way to come, which is a strain, I think, for the family. But mom said, "No, no, we love this place. Like they are doing great. Like they have made such incredible changes. Like we will continue to drive this far. We're not going anywhere. We love this place." Again, they don't need a report card to see how they're doing. They see the positive growth. And that's our focus, right? Is we talk about, we don't have the forced classes, because what we want them to practice here over and over again is just being a person, is making decisions. And that's the job of a child and an adolescent. It's a full-time job. The academic stuff is really cool when they choose it, but otherwise it's a real distraction from their very full-time work of learning who they are, what they like, and how to work with other people. They need their 10,000 hours in that. Um, and that's where the magic seems to happen. These young people come in. I think of others who came in very, very shy or, nervous. They wouldn't make eye contact with me, or wouldn't say hello, or just maybe they would wave. Um, I kind of, when that happens, I kind of assume they've been a little bit burnt out from adults, judging them or shaming them, telling them what to do. And it just takes time. I know that I just have to earn their trust. And, I think of one young person who refused to get out of the car even for their visiting week. They were just in tears, like, I can't. They were so traumatized,
Mm.
by their prior school experience, at the ripe old age of 9. Um, and, "I can't go in, I can't go in." And we were like, "Take your time. There's no rush. This is not a hostage situation. This is a choice. Like, we are so excited to see you on your terms." Um, and, it took days. And now this same young person comes in. "Hey, Kristen, how are you?" All right. And, runs their life and kind of helps runs the school. Like, it's so fun. It's just really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, and you're recording from Miami Sudbury School with your beautiful bookshelf background. You said the young people today are outside. Is it at a park? Is that what they're spending their time doing? What
Yeah,
does
they
that day like? What does that day entail?
yeah, so we're a democracy, like all Sudbury schools. We're actually a consensus-based democracy. So we all have to be able to live with the decisions. And they voted that every Tuesday we would spend the whole day at a local park. So this is one of our favorite ones, Salvador. They have a cool zip line and a giant banyan tree that lots of people like to climb. It's a frigid day in Miami. It's 60 degrees, which for us is like freezing. um, but yeah, we spend one day a week at the park, drop off and pick up from the park. It's really fun.
And it's obviously mixed age. In your case, it's 5-year-olds up to 18-year-olds. That's a hallmark of Sudbury Model Schools and of a lot of micro schools and alternative education models today. And staff members are available to, provide guidance and support if needed, if asked, but are not, again, imposing anything on the young people. So in this case, you have staff members at the park with the young people, but they're not orchestrating anything unless asked to do so. Is that right?
Yeah, I really see our role as staff is a very unique and important one in a child's life, is that we are here to hold space for them. So we hold the space for them to be who they are, and we just get to celebrate that. Um, but we step in, we say we step in when safety or democracy are in danger. And we're really explicit about that. Like, well, there's broken glass. This is one of those times that we step in. Like, this is now our adult job.
Right.
Um, or if there's a discussion, and it actually, amazingly, it hasn't happened now in a couple years, as our community has really developed and enriched. But early on, in the democratic process, there were times staff had to say, well, actually, we have to step in now because there's some railroading happening in this conversation. And, that's not going to work for democracy. We have to
Mm,
be able to maintain open-mindedness, curiosity. We don't have to agree, but we have to be able to be agreeable. Um,
I
and
love it.
those are really actually those discussions at school are so exciting. And they're so qualitatively different in this kind of chosen environment than when I used to facilitate discussions, which of course I thought I brilliantly, facilitated in my conventional school life when I, taught mainstream school and high school. But it's really different when students truly feel like they're not performing, right? Because I'm not giving grades. So we don't do that as staff. We're not there to evaluate. We are there to celebrate and to be part of their process. Um, it's really fun. We often say there's two other staff members with me here, and well, they're at the park, and we just think we have the best jobs. We love coming to school. It's our happy place too.
Yeah, I think it's great that you described a little bit more of the democratic process. One of the things that the Sudbury Valley co-founder Daniel Greenberg talked a lot about and wrote about in his book Free at Last about Sudbury Valley was that this is a school for people in the United States of America. Of course, Sudbury now schools are global, but when he and his colleagues founded Sudbury Valley, it was very much this belief that young people are growing up in a democracy in the United States of America, and yet most young people are learning in something that's not at all democratic and that's highly authoritarian. And then we expect them to come out and be competent adults, knowing how to exist in a democracy and be tolerant and open to new ideas. And that's really what Sudbury schools try to nurture and try to cultivate, which is great.
Absolutely.
So can we talk a little bit about accessibility, Kristen? Because Miami Sudbury School, like all Sudbury schools in the U.S., is a private school. It's tuition based. How does that work for you? And are school choice policies in Florida influencing that in any way? Because Florida has led the way for years in school choice policies that enable funding to follow students. to choose various educational options. And now there's universal school choice in Florida applying to all K to 12 students. So I'm just curious about accessibility and how families are able to come to Sudbury.
Accessibility is huge, and it's part of our same commitment to social justice. So we are a nonprofit private school. Our mission is to empower young people and their families. It's not to make $1 million. It's um, it's always been our commitment that we will do everything in our power. If a student wants to be here and they're a good fit, we're going to make it work. And we always have. And we're not going to let economics, finances, we have to keep the lights on and we have to pay our staff. But we always make it work for young people and their families. And those scholarships that you were talking about, the Step Up for Students scholarships, they do help a ton. So, they help us make it more sustainable to provide the accessibility that we want. Um, uh, but they don't cover everything. They cover anywhere from 40 to 50%. Um, and so we always have a financial aid application for families that's accessible. Um, and like I said, we just it's our commitment to make it work for a family. If they want to be here and they're a good fit, we want them to be here. Um, but I think this is a topic that I really do hope becomes even more and more part of a larger conversation for accessibility of this type of freedom for a young person. Because there's a lot of families that won't even look at us because we're a private school. I get it. Like there's not, I mean, especially in Miami, like housing alone takes a huge chunk of families' resources. So there's not a lot of space, I think even in the imagination to think, oh, I could get into a private school. As much as we try to put everywhere on our website, like call, 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 like if this is for you, like we're gonna make it happen. Um, but it's heartbreaking for me to see kids in honestly what I consider hostage situations at school. They don't feel any sense of choice. They have to be there. They're oftentimes being yelled at or shamed, or if they're not, then their friends are, and it's creating a lot of anxiety. I think there's a huge mental health crisis that we're seeing. And again, this is where, to me, Sudbury is about social justice. And I want that to be mental health should be accessible to everyone in a school environment as well. Um, and I think choice is a huge part of what makes kids feel really healthy. But we need those choices for families so that kids can then, have those kinds of choices. So I hope any family that's hearing this knows, we are a nonprofit private school. We want you to be here. We will help make it work. I wish we could be free. It would be that's the dream. We're just not there yet, but we're working on it.
So, Kristen, if listeners and viewers are interested in starting a Sudbury Model School in their community or just any kind of alternative education program, what advice do you have?
So actually, this summer there is a Sudbury Model. It's a Democratic Schools Symposium. In other years, it had been called a Sudbury Model Conference. It's hosted by the Alpine Valley School in Denver, Colorado. They're a Sudbury school. And uniquely, so it's in July 11th through the 14th, I believe. Um, and they are pretty uniquely having the day before July 10th is for interested startups. So individuals and groups that are interested in starting democratic schools. part of the symposium will be to support them specifically. So I really want to encourage anybody who's interested to get more information from the Alpine Valley School, or they can call us, and I'll share that information as well. I think connecting with existing models is the best place to start. And other Sudbury schools have been huge, huge resources for us. We joke that everybody has to have a first year, no matter what you start. It'd be easier if you skipped and had, got to your second year, but the trials and tribulations of the first year are requisite. And for us, the only way we got through is with the support of our colleagues. So if people are interested in providing this kind of an exciting model in their communities, please reach out, call. I'll write, text me, I'll write you back. I'd love to see more of these opportunities. And I think typically people want to help out, when we've all been through the uncertainty of starting something up. We want to help somebody else out in their process.
That's such a kind offer. The summer symposium sounds amazing, and grateful that you're offering to be a resource for anyone interested in starting a Sudbury Model School. Sudbury Valley also has a Sudbury School Starter Kit that you can purchase from their website. So there's all kinds of resources there for prospective education entrepreneurs. And I'd love to, as we begin to wrap up, Kristen, hear from you about what do you find rewarding as an education entrepreneur, kind of moving from a classroom teacher in a conventional school to now a founder running your own program. What has been most rewarding for you in that process?
Oh, it's really watching kids bloom. It's watching kids start nervous and relax. It's watching, and anxiety can look all sorts of forms, where they draw back, or when, they're trying to perform or, prove their worth. And then I just watch them settle into being okay with who they are. Um, it's so rewarding. Um, you know, I think I think it's important to say, I think my colleagues in pretty much every school, educators are working really hard, no matter what system you're in. You're working really hard. You're not in this business to make millions of dollars. Like, you're in this to work with young people. Um, and so for me, the gift has been that I get to work with young people now in a way that lets them just be who they are. They don't have to please me, perform for me, wait for my approval or grade. We get to talk with each other as people. And I get to watch them grow in ways that, inside sometimes I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful. Outside I'm like, oh, hey, cool, how you doing? All right. And play it really cool, but inside it just melts me every day in a really beautiful way, watching these young people grow, without the confines that I felt and that I know my students felt. These artificial confines in most schools, people created those. So we can uncreate them and we can get back to letting young people learn how to be people. It's a full-time job. So that's my delight. Um, and
I
it's
love
what
that.
keeps me going.
Oh, so great. So, Kristen, if listeners and viewers want to learn more about Miami Sudbury School or connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, there's a lot on our website, and we have a phenomenal mom who's updating our website, and you can enjoy her designs. Yeah, Miami Sudbury, Sudbury, sudburyschool.org. And we try to keep it updated with videos, hop on our Instagram page, and reach out, please. Call, text, write. We want to be in touch. This is a very human experience of of learning together. Um, and I think it's just as exciting for families. We hear this from families all the time, like, "Ah, I can just enjoy my child when they come home," or they're talking to me at dinner and, at first they're not gonna tell you about their day, but after a while, they relax, you relax. You get to reconnect with just being people together. So person to person, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. And I do think that as families, get over that hump of, well, it's unfamiliar. It's not what I know. It's not what, my neighbors know or my, aunts and cousins know. Once we get out of that fear and open ourselves up to curiosity, I think, and I've heard, when folks read Free to Learn, I have a student that's reading it now, and she said, You know, I love this school already, but if I didn't, reading this, I would have wanted to go here." I think once families really challenge themselves to access curiosity, that that they'll feel emboldened to look for alternatives like this and see them not as alternatives, but as natural extensions of being a person. Um, it's not so strange. It's actually really it feels really good.
I love that. Well, you're giving such a gift to the families in your community and inspiring others to open their own Sudbury model schools across the country and being willing to be a resource for them. So, thank you so much for that and best wishes for your future success at the Miami Sudbury School. Kristen Parker Yarnell, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work, Carrie.